Call to order the City of Cedar Falls Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for Wednesday, February 14th, 2018. Mr. Sturch, if we could have the roll call, please.
Thank you, Ms. Oberly. Atkins.
Here.
Arnson.
Here.
Giruso.
Here.
Hartley.
Here.
Holtz.
Here.
Leeper.
Here.
Oberly.
Here.
Saul.
Here.
And Winger is absent.
Next, we'll move on to approval of the minutes from our January 24th commission meeting. Are there any comments or corrections? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor of approval of our minutes signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you. Our minutes are approved. At this point, we'll open for any general public comments. Seeing none, we'll move on to our first only item of old business, which is the Gateway Business Park in Cedar Falls preliminary plat. And Mr. Graham, if you would introduce this item, please.
Thank you. The commission reviewed this back at its January 10th meeting. This is a preliminary plat for the Gateway Business Park at Cedar Falls. This is located near the corner of West Ridgeway Avenue and Hudson Road in South Cedar Falls. They're looking at platting 6 lots with access from Ridgeway Avenue, Commerce Drive to the east, and then Cyber Lane, which would be extended from Technology Parkway to the north. So on this slide, there's been some slight modifications from the plat that the commission saw last month. One being the highlighted circle there. If you remember, the commission last month reviewed this. There was a roundabout shown at the intersection of Cyber Lane and Commerce Drive. They did modify that to just have it to be a T intersection. And the reasoning is if you look at the bottom of that slide, there's an arrow there showing 800 feet. So it was our staff recommendation from our city engineer to move that intersection of Cyber Lane and West Ridgeway Avenue further to the east in order to maintain a distance of 800 feet from the intersection of Hudson Road. And so by doing that, they had to move that intersection approximately 150 feet to the east. And because of that, that made them change that then from a roundabout and to a T intersection. Also, I think some of the grade differences had something to do with that. And so I think logistically it worked better to do a T intersection and remove the roundabout. Also on the bottom of this slide, because they had to move that intersection with Cyber Lane over 150 feet, they also needed to move that middle road, which was Gateway Lane. They had to move that over about 150 feet as well. And they will also need to move the median as well. There is an existing median cut there in Ridgeway Avenue that will need to be shifted over 150 feet to the east to maintain that spacing due to the movement of Cyber Lane. And there's a third access there further to the east in between lots 5 and 6. That's not changing. The location of that is the same as it was when the commission reviewed this plat last month. Again, this plat is 6 lots. They're showing a recreational trail along both Hudson Road and West Ridgeway Avenue, and then several stormwater detention basins. So this slide again is showing the street connectivity. Again, West Ridgeway Avenue, it'll have 3 accesses from West Ridgeway Avenue, Waterway Avenue, Gateway Lane, and then Cyber Lane. Those 3 accesses right now will need to have a left turn lane. If you're heading eastbound on Ridgeway, there will need to be left turn lanes, and then possibly cutting into the median and moving the median to get access to those sites. Those will be developer expenses that they'll have to put in. Again, Cyber Lane would be extended to the south from Technology Parkway, and then Commerce Drive would be extended west from Chancellor Drive. So this would have numerous access points into the subdivision from existing street network. Again, the stormwater management, not much has changed due to the change in the plat. Again, there's 4 detention basins that are regional, and you can kind of see here where the stormwater runoff is going to be going into each of those basins. It's not changing much due to the change in the roadway and removing that roundabout. Again, water is going to be flowing to these detention basins from certain sections of the property. Again, so at this time, this is just a preliminary plat, which would get them started to do some of the road improvements. And you'll see later in the agenda is a site plan for one of these lots for a hotel development. So at this point, it would be staff's recommendation to approve this, the preliminary plat. One thing we are working with the developer on is those access points along West Ridgeway Avenue, looking at the possibility of potentially doing roundabouts at one or more of those intersections. Right now, they're shown as full access intersections. If that's determined that a roundabout may be feasible, we might be needing some additional right-of-way. And again, we haven't gotten to that point yet, but that's something we are studying at this point. So if we do need additional right-of-way, we'll do that before this plat moves on to City Council.
Any immediate questions for?
Yeah, so what's the, I guess, what's the reasoning for thinking it may need a roundabout, or why is one preferred? It doesn't look like it's really a necessary item. Well, just, my looking at it, but.
I think just it's looking out into the future. So we're trying to look at the future roadway. The city owns all that land to the south, of which we would like to develop sometime in the near future as well. So we anticipate this corridor to become a busier road network, almost maybe like a University Avenue, and so just looking at to see, with the access that the city may need into their lots to the south, does a roundabout make sense? And so those are things we're going to start investigating, and if those things are warranted, that says, hey, we can put a roundabout here, this would improve traffic flow, especially with the city's lane to the south. It's better to do that now, especially going through the preliminary plat, because then we can acquire that right away instead of allowing a full access, and then 2-3 years later when the city wants to develop its land, we thought, well, hey, the roundabout would make sense here. So we want to look at this ahead of time and just kind of check to see what the feasibility would be for that future growth.
This is projected to be a pretty busy road, right, long term. With the number of access points, are we creating any problems there?
On Ridgeway?
Yeah.
I don't.
It seems like a lot of access points.
Yeah, I don't think so. And our city engineer is here if he wants to chime in on it. But I think the city engineer was okay with the 3 accesses as shown. And again, the spacing between them, again, that's why it was the engineer's recommendation to move that intersection back from Hudson Road, is knowing that road will be busier in the future. I think the space in between those, he was okay with. So at this point, I think we're okay with the accesses as shown.
I have a question about the rec trail. So we're requiring them to put a rec trail along Ridgeway and then again along Hudson Road going north. Is that rec trail going to connect with anything else along Hudson Road, or is that just going to stop at Technology Parkway or wherever?
Yeah, at this point, we haven't looked any further than Technology Parkway. I think it would be the thought to get it to Technology Parkway and then look to see if any future, there's no immediate plans to go any further north, but that was something that the city would be investigating long term.
Because it doesn't seem to, I understand why we're doing it, but if it's not going to go anywhere and it's not going to connect with much, what's the point?
Well, there's those trails at Prairie Lakes Park, which isn't too far away from that intersection. Mm-hmm. So if there's a way we can kind of get connected with that network, I think that's something the city would like to look at doing.
But that's city property along there. That's the Greenbelt area, so is the city going to put trail on there?
That's something we would look at.
Okay.
Yeah, it would if it's along, city property, it's something that we would look at doing. We'd have to look at our trail plan and see kind of what it shows for.
Okay.
That's something we'd definitely be interested in doing, that connectivity.
Okay.
So the last question I got here, the Lot 2, is that where we're looking at the right-of-way discussion for the roundabout? Is that the spot? Northeast corner of the intersection?
Yeah. Let me go back here real quick, Brian. Yeah, so on this slide, where I have the circle between Lot 2 and Lot 4. So back last month when we introduced the plat, that intersection was shown about 150 feet further to the west, and there was a roundabout there. And so because they had to shift that east due to the city engineer's recommendation on that street moving further, they decided to go with a standard intersection at that location.
Okay. All right.
I'll ask if there's an applicant present, if they would like to address the commission at all. We'll then open it up if there's anyone who would like it to make any public comments on this item. Seeing none. Any other questions, comments from the commission? Further discussion?
I'd make a motion to approve.
There's a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Let's go ahead and vote. We have all ayes. That item is approved and will recommend approval, and it will move on to City Council. Moving into our new business agenda items. Our first agenda item is regarding the CBD overlay, and Carol Lilly from Community Main Street.
Hi, thanks for having me. Citizens and property owners recognize the character of development in downtown is of community interest. It is our goal that the community continues to develop in a coordinated manner so the character of the traditional built environment is maintained. Community Main Street committees work to create an environment where our business mix, dining, nightlife, service, and retail can be successful. In doing so, we seek high-quality construction that supports economic development and strives to maintain an active environment. I could go into an entire presentation about the Main Street philosophy and how it has fostered economic revitalization of downtown, but I'll just cite one impressive stat. From 1987 through 2016, the assessed value of the Central Business District has increased by 821%. Not only is downtown a hub for smaller, local independent businesses, a tourism destination, and a quality of life amenity, but it provides a significant tax base for the city. During the last Planning and Zoning Committee meeting, Commission meeting, updating the Downtown Overlay Ordinance was discussed. Today, I would like to provide some context from Community Main Street's perspective on the relationship between the Overlay Ordinance and our design guidelines. Design guidelines provide a basis for making fair decisions, for consistency in design review. They are a tool for education, and they help property value enhancement. Some communities even provide financial incentives for historic renovation projects for both small and large developments. Our design guidelines need to be understood within their relationship to the Overlay Ordinance. The ordinance is law, and the review criteria are part of the law. In one form or another, guidelines have been in existence since 2002 and are not mandatory. They are helpful, interpretive, explanation, and recommendations. When used to help administer the Overlay Ordinance, understanding the design guidelines' usefulness and limitations can be helpful to prevent misunderstandings. According to the National Trust for Historic Preservation, design guidelines can explain, expand, and interpret the general design criteria of a local preservation ordinance. They can help reinforce the character of a historic area and protect its visual aspects. They protect the value of public and private investment, which might otherwise be threatened by undesirable consequences of poorly managed growth. Design guidelines can indicate which approaches to design a community encourages, as well as what it discourages. They serve as a tool for designers and for their clients to use in making decisions about design, and they increase public awareness of design issues and options. There are also limitations to design guidelines. They cannot serve the same legal purpose as the design review process of an ordinance. As I said earlier, the ordinance is law, but design guidelines are not. Design guidelines cannot limit growth or regulate where growth takes place. Guidelines address only the visual, impact of individual projects on their character of a local district. Growth itself is a separate issue that must be addressed through zoning ordinances and preservation planning. Guidelines cannot control how a space is used when it's built. They deal only with the exterior, publicly visible portions of buildings, not with how the interior space is laid out or used. The guidelines cannot guarantee that all new construction will be compatible with the historic area, or guarantee that creativity is used that is essential to good design, to be sensitive to the environment. And they cannot guarantee high-quality construction. As you update the overlay ordinance, I encourage the Commission members to consider how the guidelines have helped shape our successful downtown. Updating the ordinance can remove confusion by specifying which categories of information must be used and which are only advisory. Community Main Street remains committed to working with city staff, community stakeholders, both big and small, and the citizens of Cedar Falls to ensure that we provide and continue to provide a business climate in which all aspects of our business mix can thrive. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but just general, want to be a partner in continuing to help with the overlay ordinance process. So, thank you.
Thank you, Carol. We'll move on to our next agenda item. This is a Central Business District Site Plan Review for the Hampton Inn, and Mr. Sturch, if you would introduce this item.
Thank you, Mrs. Overly. I'd like to introduce this next item. It's for new Hampton Inn Hotel project at the corner of Main and First Street. It's where the old chamber site building is located. And basically, this is a downtown overlay district. We look at site plan review elements, building design elements, and other features relating to this site. So the property is in a C3 commercial district, again at the northwest corner of Main and First Street. Just want to start with a little background on this site. You know, it was the old broom factory. It was demolished in the winter of 2008, I believe, early 2008. And at that time, the property owner kind of ran through a couple ideas for mixed-use building at that site. That's up there in the upper left corner of that picture of the slide there. Had plans for Riverview Gardens. It was a 5 to 6 story mixed-use building. I think Mr. Holtz was back in the commission at that time. We ran that through a couple times and really didn't act on it. We tabled it kind of in the spring of that year, and then the council kind of took on this project and hired a consultant out of Madison, Wisconsin to take a look at this 2-acre site to see what could go on there, and we did a quick little study on that, and that was the idea there at the lower right-hand corner of this slide there. It showed a mixture of buildings, mixed-use buildings on this site from 3 to 4 stories of office and retail up to 6 to 7 story hotel and restaurant type features. So that was kind of part of those planning documents back in that time. Moving along the next couple of years from 2010 to 2012, as the State Street development property was underway and kind of developing that master plan, that property owner purchased that site from the owner of the broom factory and kind of amended that State Street plan and created this Riverwalk development plan, redevelopment plan. And the city entered into a developmental agreement with that property owner in 2012, and it kind of identified a couple more buildings there, again, for some townhomes and condos there on that corner site down by the intersection closer is 3 to 4 or story townhomes, and then up in the towards the railroad bridge is a taller building with again mixture use of condos and other type of developments. So that kind of worked its way through those early years in this development, 4 years, and then moving along, the Eagle View partners kind of teamed up with Western Home to kind of look at possibly another type of a senior facility unit down there, and they really looked at that site and eventually kind of turned their ways to the south side of town, you know, where we had the Jorgensen Plaza site plan review, and that's under construction now. So basically, looked at moving away from that site, and then kind of brings us up to what we have here now for proposed Hampton Inn hotel there. At moving the building closer to that intersection, it's a 6-story hotel. It's in the C3 district. It meets all the setbacks for that district, and then the parking too. So the parking is identified behind the hotel, you know, kind of up along the railroad tracks in the flood wall. They have 132 stalls there with access off of First Street, and that applies to how many guest rooms there are and how many employees there are. So that meets those requirements for the parking. Moving along just with some site plan elements around the site, just want to highlight some of those features. Again, we have the flood wall along the railroad on the northwest and around the north side of it. The dumpster is located there kind of behind the Little Red Schoolhouse. The parking lot at the north end of that driveway will be accessed with a parking kiosk. So it's as you approach it, you want to stay there. You kind of enter your information, they'll let you in, and probably use a key card to get in that parking lot. And along the west side of that driveway, there's going to be 5 additional stalls, which is not part of the hotel site, but it would be kind of tied more into parking for the Little Red Schoolhouse. So that will be added to the new driveway. And then moving along, again, the hotel down in the southeast corner of that site. Along the north side of the building there, up along Main Street, we have a place for bike racks they would intend to put in. And then we got the trail there along the corner of that ties in around the flood wall, and everything's connected via trails and sidewalks into the site. Moving along with landscaping, the landscaping we look at for this district, perimeter landscaping, parking lot landscaping, screening from right-of-ways or nearby streets. So there's exceptions to the code when the parking is behind the building and there's really no adjacent properties to screen by. So the exception applies in this case when it's along the flood levee, because that area where those trees are located on the northwest side or edge of the parking lot, it's going to be a berm and then a wall there. So really it's going to be, the wall is going to be your berm and screening. But taking a look at the area along First Street, we kind of identified a possibility of adding some shrubs. Can't really see that, but there's a couple trees on both ends of those parking stalls just east of the driveway, and wanted to add some shrubs along there just to add some additional screening along First Street. So with that, the parking or the landscaping is satisfactory to the code. There's some other shrubs and parking lot islands around the parking lot and the hotel site too. Moving along to site access, again, it's if you see the photo on the right-hand side, that's the existing driveway. It kind of curves into the old chamber site. Part of this project they're going to change that driveway, straighten it out a little bit off of First Street. You can kind of see how that arrow comes in. And since this is the only access to this site, the fire department requested an emergency exit. Now that's what's identified in that dashed line along the trail. So the trail is going to has to be reconstructed for the flood wall project. So the petitioner, the applicant's going to rebuild that for a wider trail and a little thicker concrete there to support any emergency vehicles or any other vehicles in case of that something to happen. Basically, a fire truck would enter the site. They have no way to come around and come out on First Street. So the idea is to install some removable bollards there at the edge of the parking lot where it ties into the trail, just to keep that access off until that emergency comes in. So if a fire truck blocks the driveway, it'll allow other people to exit the site in case of something like that to happen. So moving back to the driveway along First Street, the petitioner will rebuild that, and then our recommendation is that driveway be shifted to the west a little bit so it can line up a little bit with Washington Street. You can kind of see on that previous aerial, the north side is just offline a little bit. We want that to be moved a little bit to the west just to line up line up that driveway there. And, they're going to rebuild it, so we want them to make those arrangements with that during that construction. Jumping into the design of the building, this is the south facade, which is along Main Street. Majority of it's going to be brick and stone, and then some EIFS treatments around the cornices at the top, and then that recessed portion of the balconies there in the corner will be EIFS scored line EIFS panels there. So it provides a nice color mixture. Those different colors from a red brick to more of a, I think it's a interstate platinum brick or something, the color, they're going to have some varying wall depths on that, so it does give some sort of contrasting element to those walls, and I'll show you that in a minute in the perspective. So this is the east side, again, carrying that design around the east side of the building with, again, the majority of brick is 89%, and those are identified as number 1 and number 4 on the drawing. The stone is along the balcony, and then the EIFS again is on the cornices and in the balcony area. The north side is mostly brick and some stone. Little EIFS is identified on the canopy drive-up area behind the building. So that's where you kind of drive up behind and drop off and go and check in. And then this is the north side, again, mostly brick and a little bit of EIFS. These are the perspectives of the proposed hotel. The bottom picture is facing the corner at 1st and Main, and it has a nice little corner feature, curved feature, where you'd have a pedestrian entry there in the corner that access the rest of the parkade area. They provide a nice contrasting color for the bricks and other materials. Again, raised and recessed facade treatments between that really pops out to identify those different colors. The windows, there are precast lintels above each window and kind of sills and horizontal banding at the bottom of the windows. And the parapet is topped with a cornice feature that's around the top of the building. Again, the back of the building is as you enter the parking lot, there's the canopy there for the entry. The architect provided kind of a height analysis of this building in relation to the other buildings in the downtown area. Now, the general height of the building is roughly 69 feet, and that's the top of the parapet wall. If you kind of go to the top of that turret, it's a little bit higher, but in general, I would say that it's 6 stories, 69 feet, and the other buildings are generally 4 to 5 stories, as depicted in this. You had the Oster Theater, Black Hawk, and the River Place. Just outside the pictures, the Joker's building or 4th and Main building. That's similar to the Black Hawk Hotel. So really, in average, this is roughly 14 feet taller than the hotel. And it does kind of go back to that Riverview master plan that I mentioned earlier about a potential of a 6 to 8 story building there on that site. So it kind of follows that with a hotel idea for that corner. Just moving along with site lighting elements. The LED lights are identified in red. Those are identical to the lights that were put into the 100 block parking lot behind the 100 block on Main Street, the new one. And then the petitioner plans to add some antique lights around the building and then run it down First Street. And that's kind of ties into the streetscape plan that we have downtown on First Street, that there are a series of single head antique lights from the Little Red Schoolhouse west to Center Street in front of the Ice House, but then there's nothing really from the driveway down to Main Street. So 2 additional lights will kind of carry that plan through. The existing driveway has 3 double headlights, and those lights will be removed and replaced as part of that driveway change. So that kind of carries through with that streetscape plan. Just kind of want to go over what's going on with the levee. Again, the wall there is along the railroad and the north side of the site. The idea, this is the levee project's underway right now, and what they're doing is adding additional height to the existing wall features, wall structures, and earthen berms along the south side of the river. essentially it's going to be 2 additional feet for that wall height, I believe. So it'll protect for that larger flood events from 350-year to 500-year flood events. So right now we have a existing easement there for the site to store materials, stage materials, and I believe that runs to the end of June. So the idea is for the contractors to get in there and get out at that time. And then later in the presentation, Iris is going to talk about a little bit of the chamber building relocation. So, you know, in the spring, you'll see a lot of activity down there. I think there's some stockpile material down there now. So the idea is get that buttoned up when the chamber building leaves, and then if the hotel is constructed at this site here later this spring and then summer. And then once that's done, the hotel again will come in, their grades will match the existing. We don't want them to mess with the toe of the berm. It's a berm there on the back, as you can see on that picture, that goes up to the wall. So that will be all graded out, and there's a couple tenths of grade difference between the back sides of the parking lot, the new parking lot, to the existing grade, and that could be something that's blended in. There's a roughly 15 to 25 feet north of green space there between the edge of the parking lot and the wall that will work out very fine. Moving along to stormwater management, everything's going to be underground here as part of the parking lot design. There's going to be some inlets installed, and then that will collect all the parking lot runoff and the roof drains. So that will kind of see the arrows go into all those inlet structures. The dotted dash lines indicate the flow, the underground flow of the storm water, and then eventually it'll go into a water quality control system that catches all the debris, filters out the debris, and then that will be released into the storm sewer. Easement vacation, seems like a lot of these projects lately, we've had site plans that involve easement vacations, and there's a utility easement that kind of runs through the middle of the site. As you can kind of see in relation to the schoolhouse and the existing chamber building, it's a 15-foot wide easement that will be vacated. I believe Medicom's the only utility in this area, and they've been notified, and they have plans to move that utility in anticipation with this construction. So we'll have to vacate that easement as part of this project. So basically wanted to hear your comments and just introduce this. We have the applicant and the engineer here for any additional comments, but want to hear what you guys have to say, and then just with a couple other stipulations, again, the additional landscaping along First Street, and just give us an idea of what the dumpster enclosure looks like. If you remember on the site plan, that's behind the Little Red Schoolhouse. We like to have a enclosure plan to maybe match the design of or the materials and color of the building.
We'll follow our standard presentation order for this item, giving the applicant a chance to present. We'll open it up for public comment and close that public comment, and then give the applicant another opportunity to respond to any comments, and then bring it back to the commission for questions and discussion. So at this point, I'd like to invite the applicant, if you're here and would like to speak, to come up and address the commission on this item. State your name and address.
Yep. Om Patel, 420 3rd Avenue in Coralville, Iowa. So again, thanks David for the introduction and talking about the hotel project. I just want to give a little bit more background on our company and the brand that we chose here. So again, my name is Om Patel. I'm the Director of Development at Hawkeye Hotels. We're based out of Iowa City. Hawkeye Hotels was formed in 1982 when Bob and Angie first immigrated to the country and purchased the shut-down 17-room roadside motel in Mena, Arkansas. It's a humbling story that shows qualities of sacrifice, hard work, and determination. And Hawkeye Hotels now owns and operates over 50 hotels across the U.S. and over 17 states. We currently have 8 hotels under construction, with an additional 20 in the pipeline across the U.S. To be started in the next 24 months. So the Hampton Hotel brand is an upper mid-scale hotel chain under the Hilton portfolio. It's one of the largest hotel franchises in the U.S. and includes over 2,500 locations worldwide, representing over 20 countries. For this specific project, we're committed in developing a unique hotel with a significantly richer element compared to other Hamptons that shows characteristics of downtown Cedar Falls and a custom design altogether. As you saw in our renderings, this is much different than any other Hamptons you've seen across the country. We've hired some of the leading hotel designers and architects to produce a state-of-the-art building that will have a modern touch while incorporating the historical downtown elements. We look forward to working with the City of Cedar Falls to take this project from schematics to a fully operating hotel. That'll be a major part of the downtown Cedar Falls community. Thank you.
At this point, we'll open up the opportunity for any public comments. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry. No. I thought you had a question.
Nope, not yet. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak to this item, we will close the public comment session then and bring it back to the commission for discussion, questions.
I think it's a great development, and it's an important site, an important project for the city. I think we could look at a little bit, if you look at the drawing comparing to the existing buildings, I think we could look at some of the architectural features about a strong base that is transparent. It really is kind of a Main Street theme that I'm not sure we're carrying out here completely. It seems to me like it's a bit of a suburban solution, and it could be a little bit more specific. I have seen this hotel before around the country. I don't think it has to be historic, and it shouldn't be, in my opinion, but some level of detail, strong base, some just details. I don't think it's quite there yet, just my opinion.
Yeah, I think that that sums up the opinions I've got. It's close. I think it's close to what's required for downtown. We've got some other buildings that are adjacent that may have some other things we might be looking for. I think the blend in of the things along State Street, and obviously what's coming across the street on First also has some additional things that kind of blend that character maybe a little bit more towards, again, not a corporate look, but maybe a little less of a corporate look. I kind of got that feel here. Not that it's, again, it's close. I just don't know what it is that I'm looking for, but it's maybe just a little less on the corporate side and a little more looking across the street at some of those features. Window treatments or less ephes and more stone. I don't know what I'm really looking for there, but it just maybe doesn't quite match. But again, great redevelopment here. We don't want to let this get away because that thing's been sitting here for 10 years, right? And it's time for something to be there, and it could really impact, and it's going to change downtown. There's going to be people downtown in mass that aren't normally there. So this is a very big project for all the business owners on that street. So appreciate the effort there.
I also think it's a great development and is needed in Cedar Falls. I understand where my fellow commissioners are coming from. As a developer, they have to consider their costs. I'm just wondering if there's a way to arch some of the windows or put some arching treatment over the windows that might correspond with some of the arches on the buildings shown in the pictures, like the hotel, the theater, Jokers, some of those. So maybe there's some arching element, and maybe it's not the window that's arched, but maybe it's a design element that you could put in that might help, or keys in the tops or something like that. I think that would help it greatly.
Yeah, good comment.
comments or direction? The applicant?
I guess I'd make a comment on, I think one of the things in the staff report, you talked about a little bit, David, was the height being an issue, and that needed to maybe be discussed. I guess my opinion is that the height's not an issue, but that's, I think it's reasonable. I mean, C3 doesn't really have a limit, as I recall, so, and it,
C3 could go probably twice as tall
Right.
as this
right.
proposed.
And I don't think it, and I don't think, I don't think it's unreasonable in any, height-wise.
Yeah, that drawing looked a little bit misleading. It's only 10 feet between the top of, if you look at that drawing you had there a little bit earlier, that was 10 feet between the top of the Blackhawk and the top of basically 55 to 64 feet. So 10 feet's going to be pretty, obviously it's going to be very distinctive and very much going to stand out, but 10 is probably not over the top.
Yeah, if you look at that, that's kind of the roof height, then you add the parapet wall to it.
On the
So
parapet,
it
sure.
does
Sure, but
add a little more height, but.
Yeah.
I mean, it does have the distinction, too, of kind of being across the street from the main downtown,
Yeah.
if you will, because that's, First Street's a bit of a barrier, in a way, as it goes through there also.
Yeah, it lengthens Main Street for us. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the customer drop-off point, it's not on Main and First, it's around the backside where that canopy is.
That was one of the first ideas of possibly having a customer drop off on First Street. We looked at that location of distance from Main Street, being DOT roadway too. They kind of changed their plan to kind of come in behind the building for that canopy drop-off area. But then that, again, there is that works its way through the lobby up to that corner on Main Street as a pedestrian flow to make that connection down to the parkade.
That's great.
So vehicles would go around behind the building.
Okay. That's not a very good place to stop.
In regards to discussions of using the river for more recreational purposes, and certainly having the hotel here would be beneficial, are we taking that into account with the site plan for what we might, as a city, as a community, want to be able to offer for recreation regarding the river?
Yeah, we're kind of looking at that right now, kind of working with a river consultant here the next couple months and bringing back that. I think next month actually presenting that to City Council, but the idea is to make those trail connections, bring the river closer to downtown. Again, that kind of runs clear down to the plaza at the end of East 2nd Street, so it kind of develops a nice little loop. And again, as part of this levee project, we'll maintain that wall opening. I think it shifts to the east a little bit, but that does still maintain that connection with the trails, sidewalks, and that area. Additional walking paths, looking at possible in-water features, so might change here down in the next 5-10 years in that corridor.
So I think a follow-up to that is the current opening that's in the flood wall that you get the bike path through. That remains intact with the reconstruction?
Yeah, the opening, there'll still be an opening, but I believe it shifts to the east a little bit.
Okay.
So that'll be opening and then controlled by panels as needed.
Okay.
When the waters come up.
All right.
So far, all of our comments have been, or Mr. Patel, have been along the lines, I think, of maybe some changes to design, first floor.
Yeah.
Any additional feedback or questions for the applicant? Well, we have him here.
Well, obviously, it's hard for me to sit here and define what I think I want to look at. I don't know what it is. But are we going to be able to see, I don't know, not a total redo, but some kind of second attempt here to bring forward some of the comments that have been made here? Or do we have what we have?
We'd like to work with the developer and the architect here in the next week and possibly get this back on the commission for 28th.
Okay.
Maybe we can see some different changes at that time.
Mr. Patel, could we invite you back up? Are there any things you've heard here that we could ask you to respond to, or?
Just had a quick question. Are there any specific elements that you're looking for? Because we don't want to go back to the design table and not really know what to put out and then be back here again in 2 weeks with the same comments.
Well, I think the arches would have helped greatly. Would you agree? Arching over the windows or
Window treatments.
Yeah.
arching elements of some sort? Because it seems like all the buildings that are shown in comparison all have some of that element. Is
Well, I
there
think
anything else?
Brad's comment about, creating a base, I mean, traditional architecture has the base, the middle, and the top, image created somehow. You can still do that in a kind of a modern style, but, I think that'd be a spot to start looking at.
I don't really see that it has to be historic,
Okay.
and
Right.
maybe it shouldn't. It's not going to compete with those buildings, right?
Right.
In that way.
We were trying to incorporate the red brick just to kind of make a match with the rest of the downtown.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, for sure, yeah.
Yep.
For me, it's the base and maybe some added detail, It seems a little suburban,
Okay.
So I think your drawing is great. That has a comparison to the other buildings around it. I just have your design team look at the really base kind of elements of that. So strong base, maybe some more transparency on the ground floor, some scale and texture.
Okay. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. So this item will carry forward. We'll continue the discussion at the February 28th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Our next agenda item is the Highway 1 District Site Plan Review for the Holiday Inn and Suites Conference Center. And Mr. Graham, if you would introduce this one.
Thank you. This is a site plan review for another hotel and a conference center. This was in relation to the first item on the agenda, the Gateway Business Park plat. So this is a site plan now for Lot 1 of that plat, which would have frontage along Hudson Road and Cedar Lane, just south of Technology Parkway. This property is zoned Highway 1 district, and it's also located within our Highway 20 Commercial Corridor Overlay District. Again, this site is about 9 acres in size, and so they're proposing a 4-story, 126-room hotel with an attached 31,000 square foot conference center. Looking at the site plan itself, so on this slide here, we got the hotel on the south side of the property, and then the conference center on the north side. Again, 31,000 square foot conference center, 4-story hotel. You can see some of the site elements here. I'll start with the upper left. They are showing room up on the north side of the property for a future hotel. And they are showing additional parking stalls, an additional 76 parking stalls at the north side of the parking lot as well for that future parking for a future hotel. Again, there is a recreational trail, as was mentioned during the preliminary plat, along Hudson Road. So they're showing the recreational trail along Hudson Road with a trail connection down at the southwest corner of the property to the site, so you can easily get off of the recreational trail and enter the site instead of having to use the driveway. The conference center's main entrance will be along the west side of the building, and then the hotel's main entrance will be on the south side. Both will have drive-up canopies. There is a location for bicycle racks on the west side of the hotel, kind of where that trail connection is, so it kind of blends that whole thing together with the trail connection and then having a spot to park your bicycle if you have it. There is a typical 5-foot sidewalk along Cedar Lane, which is required per the subdivision ordinance as well. And then trash dumpster. The trash dumpster is going to be actually located inside of the conference center building. There's going to be an overhead door on the east side of the conference center there that will have the trash enclosure within that. So the total site has 346 parking stalls. The ordinance would require 343, and that's derived based on the number of hotel rooms, the number of employees, and the square footage of meeting space. So they are exceeding that. So they're showing the 363 parking stalls, and again, they're showing a future addition of 76 parking stalls for that future hotel. The parking will kind of be on the north side, the south side, and the west side of the building, again, to accommodate parking for the conference center and the hotel as well. Looking at some of the design criteria for the Highway 1 district, again, looking at landscaping, they are showing street trees along both Cedar Lane and Hudson Road. They're also showing trees within the parking areas and trees along the perimeter of the parking areas. Again, it's kind of hard to tell from this plan because it's such a large site, but they're showing numerous trees and shrubs and perennials kind of in and around the hotel and the conference center with some of those larger shade trees and kind of in the parking islands. So they are meeting the site points for landscaping and as well as for open space. The ordinance requires 15% of the lot area be required for open space, and they're showing about 16.5%. So both the landscaping and the open space requirements appear to be met there. Stormwater management. So the water runoff will be collected via intakes in the parking lot. They will be, the roof drains will empty out into the parking lot and then be carried. You can see how these arrows work. Everything will be moved from the south, and then it'll kind of be collected along the west side there and piped to the detention basin at the very north end of the property. So everything will be collected on site and then run via those pipes to that north side into that regional detention basin. Building design. So this is a 4-story building. The main level is mostly brick material and stone. The upper floors, the second, third, and fourth floor is mainly stucco. They're showing a couple different color variations of stucco and a couple different patterns. And then some of it will be metal paneling. A lot of that metal paneling, which is black in color, is right around that main entrance feature with the sign at the top. That main centerpiece will be glass windows and black metal paneling. So they are showing a mix of those materials. You can see most of it, 57% is stucco, 28% is brick, 7.5% stone, and then about 7% metal paneling. So what I want to show on this slide is the areas that I have circled in red are some areas on each side of that main glass and metal panel area. They kind of stick out a little bit from the main building, and that was a comment that staff had to the developer is, could any of that be looked at to increase some of that brickwork or some of that stonework to kind of enhance that visual centerpiece of the building, which being the main glass, and then with the Holiday Inn sign, seeing if there could be the possibility to add some more brick or stone. We did get that comment to the developer, and they did not provide any updated design. And you can see in your staff report, they gave some reasoning about having that strong masonry base, and then that middle pattern, and then that top feature with the Holiday Inn sign. So I guess staff would look for the commission's input on whether any design elements, whether it's adding more brick or stone to this centerpiece, as staff had asked the developer, if there's any other design features that the commission would like to see, we'd look for your input on that. Again, here's some exterior perspectives. So the top image is as if you were looking at the main hotel entrance along the south side of the building. Again, you can see it'll have a covered drive-up canopy, and that first floor will be mostly brick and stone, again with the upper floors being that ephes, and then that center metal panel and glass feature with the sign at the top. And the bottom image is of the conference center view. Again, that conference center will just be one level itself, and then that one level will be mostly brick and stone. And you can see it's got some differing roof heights. It'll have a flat roof, but differing heights again, and the conference center has a drive-up canopy as well. When looking at this surrounding area, so the surrounding area is not well developed at this time. There is a hotel located just to the north. That's a 3-story hotel. It's got brick on the first floor and EFIS on the second and third. And then kind of looking further north and east along Technology Parkway, a lot of the buildings out there are built with either EFIS or stone or brick and have flat roofs. So I think as far as compatibility goes, this hotel matches the general area. Again, there's not a lot of development right adjacent to this, but looking a little further north into the technology park, we do see some similarities in the design of the building. The signage plan. So this slide shows some signage. They're showing one 21-foot high sign at the southwest corner. There's 4 entrances onto this site. You can see 2 off of Hudson Road, 2 off of Cedar Lane. They're showing basically a sign at each location. The signage height for the main sign at the southwest corner is fine, and however, the ordinance states that you can only have 2 additional monument signs, and so they are showing 3 additional, so they're showing 1 more than what would be permitted. So they can change one of those signs to be a directional sign. Directional signs are allowed. These signs, these smaller signs, are about 7.5 feet tall, and about 32 square feet in size. So the ordinance would require one of them to be changed to a directional sign if they want to do that. And then again, the image at the top right is the main wall signage on the building. It's going to just have the hotel logo up at the top of the building, which would appear to be meet the sign guidelines for a wall sign. Real quick, the 2 entrances off of Hudson Road, they are going to put in a 100-foot turning lane. So it's not a deceleration lane, but there will be a 100-foot turn lane in order for traffic to get off of Hudson Road and be able to slow down to get into the site. And again, that will be something that the developer will install with these accesses from Hudson Road. So at this time, staff just wants to gather comments from the commission, continue the discussion at the February 28th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Again, we'd like to review that signage plan for conformance with that Highway 20 overlay zoning district requirement of only allowing the 3 signs, and they're showing 4, so we'll want to work with them on reducing that. And then again, wanting to gather any comments that the commission may have regarding the design of the building, and then any other comments or direction that the Planning and Zoning Commission may have for the developer.
Thank you. Is our applicant present? So would you like to address the commission? Please come up forward. State your name and address, please.
Yeah, Atul Patel, 307 Winding Ridge Road, Cedar Falls. So you can answer you can ask any question you want, but I just wanted to take some time to introduce Open Door Hospitality. We are heavily invested in Cedar Valley and surrounding towns, and this is one of a project that kind of took shape with PIPEC not around. So we are doing our best to kind of have the niche and kind of stuff that wasn't there to be incorporated in this one. So we are working with the brand, IHG brand, that is also governing a lot of the stuff with exterior look and where the sign's gonna be. So there is more than us, you know what I'm saying, that's calling the shots. So there is some consideration that has been put into this place, and whether we can do it or we will not do it is a different story, but we would like to get at least the permission to do it, especially with keeping in mind the future expansion that we will be planning, if all goes well as planned, to the north of the site. So hence, we haven't taken anything out, and we are looking forward to see if it can be approved so that down the road, when we really need it for something else, we have it. Not knowing it's going to be considered as a separate site or a part of this site, because it's going to be all kind of together. You know, it's going to be tied together. It could be either a future expansion of the event center, or it could be a hotel, not knowing what's going to happen.
Okay.
Anything else that?
I'll address
Yeah,
really
yeah,
couple
perfect.
questions.
I'm Alicia Schmitz. I'm with Russell, the design builder for the project. My address, 2030 Northridge Drive, Coralville, Iowa. In regard to the signage that Shane talked about, we are eliminating one of those signs. It really does just need to be a directional sign. The original thought was to have a Holiday Inn sign so that if, no matter where they're coming from, Cyber Lane or Hudson, that they'd see the hotel, but it's a pretty large endeavor in itself, so you shouldn't be able to miss it. Sorry, those renderings did not show the color nearly as well as I had hoped. There is actually two different colors of stucco when you look at the building. Part of what Shane was describing on the exterior of the building, IHG also came back to us. There was one iteration before this one, and IHG came back and said, redo that front entrance. It was too much glass and not enough building. And the design inspiration they sent off had more of this aspect of that glass being really the center frame of it. So we're in a kind of a quandary between the two, IHG and Cedar Falls, which design is technically better. It's not a matter of the cost. They're both about the same. So it's really, if you guys have comments and opinions of that, we'd love to hear them so that we can figure that one out a little bit more. Was there any other one, Shane?
No, just the design question and the signage, which
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak to this item? Okay. Bring it back to commission. We'll close public comments and bring it back to commission. Any questions for the applicant or discussion, feedback? Yes, Shane, if it's possible, could you bring up the image and maybe just with the image in front of us? She referenced maybe the colors not being clear.
Yeah, can you go to the
perspective.
That one. So what you're not seeing is there's actually,
Can you come back up?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Stephanie was trying to tell me that. I didn't see the finger.
That's the finger, yeah.
So on either side of the building, you can see the cornice that's running and forming, not that I can point and show you guys, but the cornice that's running from the west side of the building, yeah, that one right there. So all that underneath there is actually more of a tan color that it's not coming through at all in this rendering. And then also on the other side of the main entrance is also that tan color. It's not nearly as monotone as this.
It's two-tone above the brick. And
Yes, yeah. And then those cornice parts are actually, one is proud of the other.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question on the, you're talking about the columns on those two cornices, is that it? Is that what you're bringing up, Shane?
right, just on each side of the glass feature at the front, that was something, like I said, you can see it protruding out, and so it was just a comment from staff as if they could maybe do something with more brick or stone on that to kind of enhance the feature of the main glass portion of the building.
Looks like a good project.
Thank you.
Well, obviously, this is the first thing you're going to see when you come into Cedar Falls. And, it looks like the pictures that we've got look like it's going to be a substantial building. I guess if we're worried about the renderings, perhaps next time we can have if we're looking at this a little more detail, if there's something you want to show us at that point that might reflect this coloration difference, those kind of things a little clearer, that might be okay. But looks like a very substantial and significant investment coming into town. So first thing we're going to see.
I love it, so.
Yep.
I'm glad to see something out there more than a cornfield.
Yeah.
And I've been on that land a long time. I was a kid living on that farm, 7 years old. That's a long time ago for me. So I'm glad to see it.
Yeah, it's a good spot.
Commissioners, any other feedback for the applicants or questions for staff? Or?
So I guess, is there a similar hotel, I sense it's an ISG, or it's a more of a corporate type thing. Is there a similar building that has been built like this that might be helpful, that might be a real picture? Similar?
So this particular design is more of a hybrid.
Okay.
Most of them do not have the bigger glass centerpiece.
Okay.
There were a couple ones that Shane had pulled up, different overall concept, but yeah, we can show a couple.
Okay, if it's helpful to show the coloration and the building design, that'd be great. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So that item will continue on to our next Planning and Zoning meeting as well on February 28th. Our next new agenda item, College Hill Neighborhood District Site Plan Review for 917 West 23rd Street. This is a sign and awning review. And Ms. Lehman, if you would introduce this one.
Thank you. So the owner of 917 West 23rd Street is requesting a facade review for what they're proposing for their new tenant, a projecting sign and number of awnings on the site. The property is located in the edge of the College Hill neighborhood overlay. So the type of improvements they're looking at doing, the projecting sign and awnings, does qualify under the substantial improvement clause of that overlay section. So that's why it's in front of you today for review, since it needs approval from both P&Z and Council before moving forward. So taking a look at the proposal, here's an image showing the existing front of the building with the proposed sign and the two awnings kind of put on there. I also included details of those. You can't really see the awning details on the drawing, but those would be what they would look like. The proposed sign will be lighted and will be located above the entrance of the store, again advertising the new tenant for that building. Overall, both the awning and the projecting sign meets all zoning standards and codes in terms of size and height above the sidewalk. The College Hill neighborhood did review the request and had no objections to it. And with that, staff is recommending approval of this proposed request for the projecting sign and the multiple awnings on the site.
Thank you. Is there anyone present who'd like to speak to this item? Bring it back to the commission for any questions, comments, motion.
Motion to approve?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Please go ahead and vote. And we have all ayes on that item. That item is approved, and we'll recommend approval forward on to the City Council. Next item in new business is the Central Business District Site Plan Review for the Chamber Building relocation. Ms. Lehman.
Yes. So we talked earlier about the proposed hotel project at this site. So for that development, the Chamber Building would either need to be relocated or demolished. So Community Main Street is proposing to relocate the building to the southeast corner of the River Place development near the entrance to the water reclamation site by the river trail. So you can you can see on the image they provided a great map showing the original site and then the yellow kind of highlighted area where they're proposing to put it there in the corner. So they're also proposing to utilize the site for their new office space. And as it's in the Central Business District, this does qualify as a site plan review. So it is in front of us today for review. There are a number of items that we'd like to get your direction on. So this is, at this time, just a preliminary discussion, introduction to the project, and we'll come forward again for further discussion and maybe approval at the next meeting. So just a little bit of background on the site before going into the details. So as I mentioned before, this is part of the River Place development site plan that was approved. And the plan itself, the master plan shown there on the left, was approved by City Council, and that was kind of the vision for that area. A zoomed-in corner of the site that's in question today shows that site would provide 8 spots and then a number of trees. The trees specifically that would be impacted by the site are these, so 10 trees. So these are elements that we'd be looking at for consistency's sake to continue on into the proposed project, so the landscaping and the parking. So those are where those elements would come from, those comments that you'll see in the future. But again, the building would be located here on this existing. So jumping into the details of the site plan, as mentioned before, it is proposed that the building would be moved from its current site and set on a new basement at this new location. Community Main Street is also proposing to add a garage to the north side of the building, and this would be for storage of their materials and for their gator. The elements that need to be reviewed for a site plan are outlined on this slide, and I'll just quickly walk through each of those. So office is an allowed use within the C3 zoning district, so there's no concerns in terms of that. The setbacks, there are no setbacks in the C3 zoning district, so the placement of the property is fine. In terms of parking, in the downtown, office buildings and commercial buildings are not required to provide parking, but because there were 8 spots on the site that were proposed and approved for the River Place development, those 8 spots are required for consistency. So they are proposing 8 spots, but because they're now placing a building there to meet ADA requirements, we do require 1 handicapped accessible parking spot for access to the building. So that one change will need to be met to be ADA compliant. In terms of landscaping, as noted before with the master plan, there were 10 trees originally shown on that site. They are proposing 2 trees at the entrance of the site, and then one kind of along the trail there on the east-south corner, and for arborvitae, kind of along the trail there in the north, they'll be screening the utilities there on the top. So potentially those 6 plantings could be counted toward that landscaping count. The arborvitae would have to be a certain size, but that would be an additional 4 or so plantings that we'd like to see on the site. In terms of sidewalks, they are proposing connections to the trail and to the building, which is great, along with a number of bike amenities on the site. Lighting, they plan to utilize the existing lights, so no changes there. In terms of the trash dumpster, one is not proposed for this location. They would like to use a trash bin, you would see for residential uses, that they would just take from inside the building out to the curb on trash pickup days and then back in. In terms of stormwater management, as it was part of the River Place development, this site was included in the stormwater management plan for that entire development. And that development utilizes what's called an inline treatment system. Don't ask me what that means, but it does cover the entire area. And because of the building itself is under, creates under 5,000 square feet of impervious area, it does not trigger an update to the stormwater plan for the area. So leaving it as is and not having to do any updates is to code. So that requirement is met. And then one item I forgot to include in this listing is signage. They're not really proposing any signage plan for the building. They will, at this time, provide a window decal on the main entrance. So signage is met. And if they do come forward with other signage in the future, that'll come forward at that time for approval. So moving on to facade, the second part of the review, the 4 different sides of the building is shown. So this is a unique project in the fact that it is a relocation of an existing building in the overlay, but the moment you move a building from its existing site, its original, grandfathered state is lost. So in terms of our review, we have to consider it as a new construction, as a new building. So something to keep in mind when looking through the design standards. So the Central Business District outlines 6 design criteria for new buildings and improvements to buildings that need to be met. And those are outlined there at the bottom of the screen. So What I'll do is I'll quickly walk through each of those items, and then just to note that the items in red are the items that we would like some direction from the commission on from moving forward. So the first, I guess the first two I'd like to talk about are the materials and then color of the building. So it's actually interesting. So when the building will be moved, they actually have to take off all the brick for that move and then put it back on at the site. So what they're proposing to do is actually not reusing the existing brick. They'll be replacing it with brick, so similar material, but with different colors that will better match the kind of more red tones of the buildings in that area. The two colors are shown on this slide, and I believe if you would like, I think Carol brought samples of those with her. I think maybe promising. You do? Okay. Oh, she forgot them. So maybe at the next meeting. But we do have samples if that's something you'd like to see. So it'll be a lighter kind of red on the top, and then a brown kind of coffee color there along on the bottom, kind of creating the appearance of a wainscot. So in terms of the material, staff has no concerns. Brick's a highly used material in the central business district. Most of the buildings around it utilize brick. It'll be a all brick building. And again, with color, also no concerns. So in those two areas, we're fine with the proposal. The next item is proportion. And in summary, this criteria looks at the height and scale of the proposed building compared to the ones around it. So the buildings that are closest to the site are Viking Pump to the south, and then the buildings of the River Place development to the north and west of the building. And then the image that's provided for you is 300 State Street. That is the SSR1 building of the River Place master plan. That is the closest building that has been built to this development there for reference. So in general, Viking Pump is a 2-story building that tapers to a high 1-story as it goes further east. The SSR1 is a 3-story building. And then SSR2, not shown, is a 4-story building. So those would be the buildings directly surrounding this proposed development. So overall, 2 or more stories would be a better fit for this location. And then the proposed building shown is a single story. So again, this is something that we'd be looking for some thoughts on. There are single stories buildings in the districts. So again, just trying to get initial thoughts on that, on proportion from the commission. Looking at roof shape. Like the previous criteria, it asks that the buildings surrounding the sites, their roof pitches and direction be considered when doing new construction or amendments. So the proposed project is a hip or pitch style roof, shown there on the top of the screen. And the roof design criteria, or I guess the two buildings in comparison, again, Viking Pump and then 300 State Street, are both flat roofs. So, but the applicant has provided a number of images of existing pitch roof buildings within the downtown overlay, and then a map showing where they're located in relation to the proposed site. So those would be those, I think they're dark blue or black diamonds shown on that map. And then I did add the dates of when those buildings were built, just for reference point. And then just to note that it was in 2004 that the design criteria were put in place, so all but one were built after the design criteria were approved as part of the ordinance. Moving on to pattern, this section really looks at the ratio or kind of breakup of windows versus what they call solids, so just walls. The building's elevation along the east side, or East 4th Street, the south elevation, does have a number of openings with windows and the doors. However, this pattern is not carried around the other sides of the building. The north and east elevations especially are mostly all wall or solid. These two sides are also right next to the recreational trail, as close to, at one side is about 7 foot away, some are even closer, so it's right up there and very, very visible. So staff would like to see more openings along the other sides, especially the other two. So something else, again, to consider for discussion. Lastly, architectural details or features, which considers architectural details of the proposed building as compared to other buildings in the overlay. So the proposed building will add a horizontal band or wainscot of brown brick to the base of the building, which will provide a break in color and be a visual interest to it. The adjacent buildings, both the Chamber and 300 State Street, they use vertical breaks to create the illusion of modules. And this tactic is really more meant for larger buildings, so it may not be necessary for a building of this size. The windows themselves, there is an update from the staff report for this. They will not be carrying over using the sills of the original building, so those will not be included in the design or reused, so it'll be pretty much just the wainscot and the windows put back in. And then just for your reference, in looking at the buildings downtown, 415 State Street shown there on the left was the closest I could find to what was being proposed, and there are a number of architectural features there included in that design. So staff feels that some direction with architectural features, we'd like to get your opinion on that moving forward. So in summary, again, this is an initial discussion of the project, and we're seeking direction on some of our thoughts and what the code states, and then we'll come forward hopefully the next meeting with updates. And I believe Carol is here, so she will be able to answer any questions you may have or may have additional comments too on the design.
Thank you, Carol.
Sure.
Hi, thank you. First of all, thanks for the help that we've had from the city so far. When we first entertained, or when the building was first offered to us from the Western Home as a potential site for us to move move away from, our first thought was, well, where could we go? River Place generously offered to work with us at that corner site, which is basically near the wastewater treatment plant. We really felt like there really probably wasn't a lot of things that potentially could go there or that would choose to go there. It was a bit of a concern for us to be so far off the beaten path, but we wanted to practice what we preach, and our type of business is not necessarily necessary right on Main Street. So those are some of the things that we looked at when we started really thinking about, could this work? We really didn't view it as a new construction, I guess, so that was probably a little bit of a surprise to us, that that's how it would be viewed, just picking up a building and moving it. But I understand why and where that reasoning comes from. A couple of things that we wanted to point out, first of all, was I've got some pictures of the buildings that are actually right across the street from the site. Viking Pump is across the street, but the section that we would actually be nearest is only a one-story section. Which, yeah, Larry's got copies for everybody there too. So we really are looking at this section is what we feel is probably a little bit closer to where we will be. In addition, the next page is also the view towards the wastewater treatment plant. And yes, this is a little bit bigger, but there are some single-story buildings over here as well. So the height, we felt like there's enough nearby that is single-story that would be adaptable, and with the pitch of the roof, the line of sight from that location, if you look down the block, made right is what you see. You also see a little bit of Taylor Vet, so your line of sight from that building actually have the same type of pitched roofs that we would be maintaining at this location. Let me pull out my other. That's across. I'm kind of going out of order here, but as far as the ADA compliant spot, we will certainly add an ADA spot. That's no problem. The additional landscaping, certainly more than willing to add the trees that are necessary to meet those original requirements. I think I commented on the height. If you have any questions about that or any thoughts on that, I'd certainly provide more examples or more insight into that. But as I mentioned, you know, really that line of sight, there are other buildings at that one-story level. And same with the pitch and height, talked about that a little bit already too. The pattern on the more windows, again, we were maintaining the existing openings as they were and just shifting that building. When you look at the elevations in the side and the side against the trail, I guess, we kind of went back and forth on that. And from a safety standpoint also, that is the end of the street. It is a darker area. The wastewater plant actually has a gate area that they close off. We really felt like just maintaining the existing openings would be a good thing to do to minimize potential, I guess, break-ins or anything like that. But I realize that isn't part of a review process, but that was part of our reasoning. Plus, we do have some screening with some plants and that kind of thing that we have planned along in there. Let's see, what else did I miss? I think that's everything. Again, just kind of keying back into that location, being a little bit of a disconnect from the rest of the fabric of the downtown. We feel like we've met the conditions of the overlay and hope that you will consider our plan, but I'm looking forward to additional feedback.
I think this is the first time I've encountered a building relocation on commission, so it's fairly unusual, and I applaud. I mean, I think this is nice to see that we're able to reuse that structure. And
yeah, we were really hoping to keep it out of the landfill and provide it another life. You know, it is part of the history of downtown. It's not a historical building. It hasn't met that 50-year threshold, but it does have a part of our historic character in the fact that it is the original chamber site. Tourism started there. So there's a lot of things. Actually, Community Main Street's first offices were there too. So we're hoping to come full circle and be able to repurpose that building in a location that we really don't feel like there will be anything else that would potentially choose to go there.
Commission, any questions for Carol?
It looked like the building has a basement. Are you going to dig a basement for that?
We are going to dig a basement.
Okay. Okay.
So there will be an exterior staircase and an interior staircase.
Okay.
I have to note, I have a conflict of interest on this project, so when it comes to voting time, I will be abstaining.
Mr. Holst?
I would like to say that I understand the staff's questioning of the height and et cetera, but we have quite a few single-story buildings right within that area. One directly across the street, that east end of Viking.
Yeah. Yeah.
The pitch roof doesn't bother me because there are other buildings in that area with the hip or pitch roof. I don't see that this is a piece of land that you're going to put a 2-story or 3-story building on. It just doesn't seem to be. I like the idea that we're repurposing a building. I would, I understand the architectural. Maybe some more details would be nice. I don't know if we can do that with how we do the brick. The different colors of brick, maybe different around the windows, or I don't know. If there's something on the top of the window we could put, or that maybe that's a possibility.
I don't know there's a chance to incorporate any more of the features that would be on the buildings adjacent to it. Not the ones across the street, but around the same property. So it'd be the rest of the River Place look, where you got aluminum section windows or that color of brick or those kind of things that may make it look like it belongs a little bit more in that area. Not that it's, it's in an interesting spot, and there's certainly lots of other building designs around, but it would stand out as being something not part of that particular development, perhaps. I guess anything you could do to make it blend in would be the thought there. Other than that, to me, it's good reuse of the building and good reuse of a piece of property that it'd be pretty tough to find something else to go there.
I would agree. I think it's great that we have a ability to reuse the building and to use a piece of property, again, that is difficult to find a good use for. So I think it's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Other feedback on the project?
So if I could clarify, just for the next meeting, so basically, going back to the slide with the areas that we need feedback on, the height is okay, you're okay with 1 story. The roof shape is fine, as is. And then in terms of the opening of windows, is that something that you're okay leaving as is, or would you like to see more of those incorporated somehow on the other sides, or haven't heard anyone talk about that issue yet?
Not really.
I don't see a need for more windows along the bike path. I don't see a need for them along the bike path, I guess. If it were along the street, I might have a different opinion, but that's my opinion.
Not that much traffic back there. Yeah.
And then in terms of additional architectural features, I heard that that is the one thing that maybe the commission would like to see more work in, or more details in.
If there's a way to do it without spending too much money.
You can't allow cost to come
I
into
know.
play.
I know. But I just see with some color or some, I agree with what you said, Brian, just a little
kind
more.
of make it go with the rest of the development that's on that side of the street.
Mm-hmm.
Will the roofing change at all, or the same?
I believe it'll be the same.
Yeah, we've had the building looked at, and we've had the movers look at it too, and the building the roof is in a good enough condition to maintain, so our hope would be that we would be able to maintain the building or the roofing as is. I would say we do respect the process and certainly want to make sure that you understand that we respect the process too, and it's very rarely are we coming to you with a project of our own, so we want to make, our design committee has looked through it. We said, look at it as any other project, pretend that our name is not on it, so we appreciate you taking a look at it and providing the feedback so we can improve and move forward.
Okay.
I think you've used some nice strategies in terms of the blending of the bricks and the wainscoting as well. Any other comments, specifics? No. Okay, thank you. We will carry that discussion on tentatively as well for the February 28th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Our last item of new business is zoning ordinance update and introduction. The purpose of this is reviewing terminology changes pursuant to FH 134 and consistency among city codes. And Ms. Lehman, this is yours as well.
Yes, thank you. So as Ms. Oberle said, this is really an introduction of an update to actually the entire zoning code in reflection of to House File 134 that was passed in April of 2017. So I have the actual language of the file there on the screen for you to read. But in essence, what it said is that rental occupancy levels could not be determined anymore by cities or any municipalities based on the familial or non-familial status. So basically what that meant is that our the code at that time, what we had been using, could no longer be used because the entire code was based on familial and non-familial status. So in response to that, the city passed on December 18th, 2017, an update to the rental code meeting the requirements of House File 134. Most of those changes were terminology-based, mostly. So in order to be consistent and to follow the file's requirements, all codes have to be updated with the same type of language. So that's kind of the base of what you'll see here today. So really, what it is, it's terminology-based. So things like single-family home can no longer be used. It'll be a single-unit home. And even in zoning, we have R1SF, so R1 single family, we can't say that anymore, so it has to be R1 SU, single unit. So those are the types of things that you'll see in this zoning change. It really is terminology-based. The other items you'll see in there are updates to the definitions so that they're consistent with the rental code. So those are the changes that you'll see. And really, again, this is just an introduction to what you'll be seeing next time. We will have the public hearing at the next meeting and send out notice. So again, this time, just a brief introduction to it, and then if you have any initial questions, happy to answer that this time.
So this is a large find and replace effort.
Yes.
Okay.
We could go through each section one by one and discuss.
Send those to our legislators.
Is this, so your introduction, makes us think there's going to be a lot of places in the code that this is just going to be effective. If we're talking about single family to single unit, every single reference like that.
Every single reference, and even terms like unrelated, any reference to family whatsoever has to be removed. So that's every section of the zoning code has some reference to it somewhere.
So I have a question then, what does single unit mean?
So we do define unit, and that is in the code, and we do talk about it's a single living unit, and it goes into detail there. So we worked with our legal counsel to make sure all of our things were figured out. So if you're interested, it is in the specific section. I don't have it on me, but we do have a definition of it there for clarity's sake.
So is it just a long version of family then? You don't have to answer that.
Okay.
We did give you a track changes copy in your packet, and a single unit dwelling is a structure containing one dwelling unit, basically the detached home type of situation.
Thank you.
Any other questions, discussion on this one? So at our February 28th meeting, we will see this then again?
Yes, for a vote, and then also the public hearing portion of it.
There's no other discussion or items. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second?
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor of adjournment signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you. We are adjourned.